Are you afraid? Are you afraid of the dark? Are you afraid of people? Afraid of failure? Maybe even afraid of success, afraid of the future, afraid of lack of security, safety, having no money when you grow old. I mean, think about all the things that we're afraid of. Now, there must be some reason that fear is so prevalent in everybody's heart. I almost feel like, like there's a love-shaped hole in your heart that only God can fill. I wonder if there's a fear-shaped hole in our hearts as well that only God can fill. I know that's kind of a corny analogy, and maybe I grew up with that anyway, that there was a love-shaped hole and God had to fill it, and we were busy filling that hole with other, false loves, and that was called sin. And anyway, I'm not sure that works, but I do wonder why almost everybody's afraid of something. Now, I think fear is natural, and there's a time to be afraid. So if your house is burning down, somebody shouldn't come along and say, the neighbor shouldn't walk over while your house is burning down and say, oh, don't worry about that. You should be afraid. You should run out of the house. You should be afraid. That's a normal fear. That's actually a healthy fear. But there's also what I call a fear of what if. Yeah, but what if, something that's not happening. So if you lie awake at night worrying that your house might burn down, that fear is not healthy. It's just a powerful story of fear and what drives fear out happened recently. Unfortunately, our neighbor's house right across our street did catch on fire last summer. And it was about 5 in the morning when one of their kids smelled the fire and woke up mom and dad. They have 2 little girls. They all got out fine. Their dog, they have a big dog that was still in the house. The fire truck came. They were worried the dog was going to be trapped in there, so they said, can we run back and get the dog? The fireman actually, risked himself to run in and get the dog. They got the dog out safe too. So no casualties at all. They did, their house burned enough, they had to completely redo the house, but nothing of greatest value was lost. So I asked my neighbor Mike, because I thought about this then. If your daughters, or one of your daughters or your wife had been inside, what would you have done? Without hesitancy, of course, he said, I would have run back in there and done whatever it takes to get my daughter or wife out of there. In fact, he was even thinking about doing that for his dog, risking his life for his dog. He decided to let the firefighter do that. Why would Mike be motivated to do that? Was it because of courage? Would he have had to work up the courage to overcome the fear? No, because courage isn't the opposite of fear. Love is. What would motivate any of us to run back into a burning building to rescue a loved one is love. You don't have to sit outside and think, okay, come on, Carl, come on, Carl, you can do it. Go back in there and rescue your child from whatever. I mean, your loved one is drowning or in danger, and any issue like that, you would immediately dive in and do whatever it takes to get them out. Not because I'm a courageous person, not because I worked up courage, not because I had a long time of prayer and Bible reading beforehand and felt inspired. It would just be because of love. It would actually be an automatic response. See, it's perfect love that drives out fear. Let me ask you, when you're afraid of somebody or something, how do you act towards that person or that thing? If you're afraid of your neighbor, let's say you have a neighbor who's kind of weird and you don't really know what they're doing over there, and you get nervous and you see them, they look like they're sulking around inside their house, curtains drawn, and you start to become afraid of them. And then because you're afraid of them, what happens? You actually don't invite them over for dinner. When they walk down the street, you just kind of say hi, but you're pretty cold because you don't want to interact. What if you find out later that they are acting that way because they have some kind of a reason to? I don't know. They have the shades closed in the house because they're sensitive to sunlight. And they're not skulking around sneakily in their house. They're just that way, or it looks that way because of the pulled shades. I don't know. And you find that out, and then all of a sudden you go, oh, okay, you're fine. So then you invite them over. See, when you're afraid of someone or something, it's usually because you don't understand it. When you don't understand the situation or someone's life or their situation, and then you build up fear, it's almost impossible to talk about Jesus with them, to share life with them, to be friends with them. I think the Muslim world is obviously a good example of that. If we're convinced Muslims are on jihad and all the Muslims we seem to see on TV are doing something crazy, because that's, TV shows bad news kind of by definition. If you're afraid of Muslims, when you see a Muslim couple, a man with a long beard and a woman dressed in the full thing walking down the street, your heart starts to pound, and maybe you even cross the street. You don't want to interact with them. Kind of like the Levite and the priest did with the man beaten up in the ditch. They didn't want to interact with them, maybe because they were afraid. Maybe they were thinking the robbers are still hiding around the corner and will get them as well. But this Samaritan guy, he stops and he ministers to this man in the ditch. He wasn't afraid. What did he do? How did he love his neighbor? He overcame fear, and he did that by allowing God to move his heart enough to love the neighbor. He was Jesus' example of what real love is. Don't be afraid. The number one command in all of Scripture, fear not. If you're afraid, you can't act normally, naturally, helpfully to your neighbor. Let God's perfect love drive out fear.